And welcome to Viewpoint. I'm joined today by Brian Bonner. He's the chief editor at the Kyiv Post. It's an English-language weekly newspaper published here in the Ukrainian capital. Brian, many thanks for joining us.
Nice to see you, Raheem. Again?
Again. We wanted to have you here in the studio to talk, naturally enough, about the media in Ukraine, the state of the media, freedom of speech more generally. It seems to me that one place to start any kind of conversation like that would be with the rankings in the Media Freedom Index, published by Reporters Without Borders. Ukraine has more or less fairly consistently over the last few years ranked around 125 in those rankings, out of 180 countries, give or take. I wonder what you think about that rating. Ukraine is usually said to be partially free. As a newspaperman, as a man who's worked in the media here for more than a decade, I believe.
Yes.
Do you agree with that judgment? Is that how Ukraine feels, partially free?
Yeah, I would say so. Relatively, we're much freer than Russia, most of the former Soviet republics in our neighborhood.
Russia is about 150 in the ratings. So.
And so so I would agree that we have a relative freedom, but it can be much better in a lot of ways.
What kind of ways would those be? What do you see here that would give you cause for concern as a media?
Well, a lot of the things, after the Maidan revolution, people talked about the new Ukraine. We said goodbye to the old Ukraine. We said hello to the new Ukraine, where everything was bright and cheery and non-corrupt, and everything was better, or it was everything that the old Ukraine wasn't. But actually, if you look at media ownership, and we have, and the media analysts have looked at it, and the same top 5 oligarchs own, most of the media. Rinat Akhmedov, Igor Kolomoisky, Petro Poroshenko,
the president himself.
Yes,
he said he would sell his TV channel, or
right.
Stop being the owner when he became president. He didn't do that.
He did not do that.
It's not exactly setting a good example, is it?
It doesn't. And so we have what the media monitors say is when they analyze the coverage, they can tell just by the content who owns it. So this suggests that the owners are still interfering in editorial policy, and that's to the detriment of free speech.
So what do we need then? Do we need more smaller citizen-based journalistic outlets to try to combat this oligarchy? Because I think since the Maidan, we have seen a rise in citizen journalism, in social media-based journalism. That must be helping, at least a little bit.
Well, we have that. I mean, everybody can be a journalist. That's one thing. Everybody can have their own blog, but getting the audience and getting the influence is a different thing. We have on the horizon, and some of them grew up because of the revolution. We have Hromadske TV, we had Expresso TV, we have Slitstvo, we have Nashi Groshi, we have, we have First National Channel, Schema, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. We have a lot of voices, but who's watching these, and how are they funded? By and large, the problem goes back to advertising and the economy. We are only you cannot be truly independent. You're only in some ways, you're as only independent as your financial ability, and the advertising market is poor.
And that's why we rely on these oligarchies, because they're the ones with the money.
And the oligarchies, they will spend what it takes. They lose a lot of money. Free speech is not their priority. Making money is not their priority. Often their priority is just keeping the influence that having a big media outlet has for them. Now, you take a look at Hromadske TV.
Yes.
Okay, they've done some good interviews, some independent journalism, but who's watching them? I mean, the viewership on Hromadske TV versus, say, Interstill or 1+1 or some others is a vast difference.
And so is it partially then that the Ukrainian audiences actually need to switch their own views, their own ways of consuming media? They need to understand that actually there are other viewpoints now available and they should start consuming them.
I would hope they do. That would make it a true competitive marketplace of ideas, which is what we're after in journalism, so that we throw this out, we tell people what we think, and then they reach their own conclusions. I would argue, as the chief editor of the Kyiv Post, which is now celebrating its 20th birthday, 20th anniversary, that people should take a look at their independent choices. We're not the only one, but we're one of them. And by independent, we mean places where the ownership, the publisher, the commercial side does not dictate editorial policy,
Yes.
where the journalists make the final decision. What is news? How it's played? Whether we're being fair? I mean, you know, I don't think there's any disagreement that you're not going to get investigations of Akhmedov by Akhmedov-owned media and so forth.
But I think so. It seems like though that these are somewhat perhaps challenging concepts for a Ukrainian audience, which is used to, for so long, to having very polarized media. Basically, they just consume the message that they want to hear, and it reinforces their own views. So it is about perhaps developing the audience to understand how to consume the media and to look at different sources as well.
I think we've got to earn the trust.
And the Kyiv Post, I assume, sort of feels like it has a role to play there.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that we do. I mean, our motto is independence, community, trust, and I believe we've earned it. Our readers are telling us that. Our advertisers are telling us that. And but there are others out there, and that are trustworthy voices that need to be heard. And you know, the latest evidence of some of the problems and challenges in the media came from the OSCE during the election. In their statement yesterday, they said essentially that the big media only allowed 2 or 3 parties to be heard, and it looked like there was interference in editorial policy, in coverage. They said there was paid-for coverage.
So, I mean, so it's sort of like 18 months, sort of 2 years almost after Maidan. We're still looking at some of the very much the same problems that we've always had. So, I mean, all the promise and the expectation we had of moving towards Europe and becoming more democratic and more free doesn't really seem to have been realized just yet.
It hasn't institutionalized, and that media is only one reflection of it. But, you know, it's not a black and white situation, as you know. We're making progress, yes. We have some voices out there, yes. We have some investigative journalists out there. Yes, we have a greater degree of independence than we have ever had as a nation, Ukraine as a nation. You know, definitely better than the Kuchma era. Yushchenko era was pretty free, but Yanukovych era was, again, back to repression. And so we have this lurching forward, but we're not there yet. I mean, in media, I think we'll be there when we have truly independent ownership, where the owners don't have a political agenda, or where they have a hands-off the editorial policy, and where journalism makes money, makes its own money.
Right. So
it doesn't have to depend on the oligarch owners, doesn't have to depend on grants. It can sustain itself through the market, and that goes back to the economy.
I think that, though, for that to be achieved, I would suggest that there would be 2 things, perhaps, that we need to see for that to happen. One would be that we need the war in the east of the country to stop. So we need peace. Secondly, I think we'd probably have to see a little bit more commitment from the government for that to happen. For example, we've seen that they've set up this Ministry of Information Policy earlier this year. Now, on the one hand, that came in for a lot of criticism because people look at that and they see it as just like a ministry of truth, trying to control the flow of information in this country. At the same time, the ministry itself says it's committed to freedom of speech and openness and democracy, but the very fact of that ministry's existence, I think, is it cause for concern? Is it not cause for concern?
It is cause for concern. Anytime they set up a thing called the Ministry of Information Policy, they took some missteps right from the beginning by banning some journalists from Ukraine, including some BBC journalists.
Yes, which they then went back on, but
it
didn't look good.
They did look good. It didn't look good. I think there's a role to play for government, but I think the role for government is setting up laws that allow for voices, that allow for a freedom of speech, that protect journalists with strong laws against censorship, strong protections for libel, strong where the standard is very high. And I also think that government just has to. I think there's a place for a true public TV station,
which we're still waiting for.
Which we're still waiting for. But I also think that by and large, it is government can also play a role by being itself more transparent and responsive.
Right, we're very short on time, I'm afraid.
Right.
It was just 30 seconds left. So in a word, or a couple of words, what is your recommendation then, going forward? What do we need in Ukraine?
Well, we need the institutions to work at all levels. We do investigations, there's no prosecutions. We expose wrongdoing, there's no follow-up. The institutions need to work at every level, and the owners have to stop interfering with journalism, journalists' pursuit of the truth.
Brian Bonner, many thanks for joining us here on Viewpoint.
Thanks, Raheem.
You've been watching Ukraine Today. I've been in the studio with Brian Bonner. He's the chief editor at the Kyiv Post. It's a weekly English-language newspaper published here in the Ukrainian capital. You're watching Viewpoint. Join us again tomorrow for another edition.